Today we're going to be looking at how we can take a mesh and some type of skeletal structure, like a biped, and combine them so that our skeletal structure can control the mesh. And the process we're going to use for this is called skinning. So the first thing that we'll want to do after we have a mesh, and I have a basic mesh that I got off the internet, a little werewolf, I'm going to create a biped because we talked about using the biped to skin. So I'm going to create a biped, and there is another video of some basics of biped, so I'm not going to really go over the basics. What I am going to go over though is creating the biped to match the character, and by character I mean mesh, this werewolf. I'm going to create the biped so that I can kind of mimic the structure of the character. All right, so what we're going to do is I've already created the biped, so I'm going to go to my Modify tab, select the bone of my biped, not my Modify, I apologize, Motion tab. I'm going to go to the Motion tab, and I'm going to go to my Figure mode. Now from Figure mode, what I can do is come into the structure, and I can change the height of the biped if I want. So my biped right now is a little short, so I'm just going to drag upwards. If I want to add bones, I can. If I want to remove bones, I can. So I can see that I have 5 fingers, but I think 3 finger lengths for each one might be, no, we'll go with that. We'll see what we can do. But we do have 4 toes. And if you can see on my biped, I've only got 1 toe. So instead, what I'm going to do is create 4 toes, 3, not 5, just 4. And we're going to say maybe 2 lengths, 2 toe lengths. I think this will be good. Now, when we're skinning a character and we're getting the biped ready for a character, one of the things that's really going to save us some time is the copy and paste, which we talked about in another video. That way I don't have to do double the work. Now, what I'm going to start doing is kind of moving the character, the biped, to be where I want it to be to line up with this character. So maybe the pelvis will rotate it forward a little bit. The spine bone maybe will rotate it a little bit. What I'm doing is I'm using the structure of the mesh that I want to skin to dictate where my biped should be. So maybe that spine bone needs to come down a little bit. If I want to scale it, I can. It's okay. If I want to have the biped be a little bit more proportional, I can do that too. This is not going to affect how it moves or how it works. Maybe I want this bone to be longer. I want to mimic what we would see in a real body. So the ball right here, the ball of this bone for the shoulder, I want it to be about where the shoulder would move. And then the arm, let's rotate it so we've got more of the same action going on. And let's use all of our different views. So I can see that although in the front view my shoulder looks pretty good, on the top it looks like it's a little bit forward. I'm going to bring that back. So maybe this needs to be rotated a little and scaled a little. And I have a certain workflow that I like to do. If you have a different workflow or something that you're more comfortable with, then please use that. I'm just used to working this way. It's a little bit faster for me. I want to have a slight bend in that elbow. Okay. My forearm, maybe come out a little bit. Let's see about that hand. Let's bring it up a little bit, maybe. Let's move these fingers. I have the thumb. Let's move it about in the position that it would be found. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to get everything exactly how it would be. I'm going to try to get a safe or a good approximation. But we don't want to have a 4-hour video where you're just watching me move bones. But I will show you some time-saving techniques, mainly using copy and paste to help us. So let's say we say that finger's good. We definitely want to have some more time spent on it because we want the joints and the mesh to line up. So we can have good deformation when we go to animate. So let me show you what that looks like on one. What I mean by that is we want the bones in our mesh to be in the same places that they would be if this was a real character. So here we have geometry. So this is where we want our finger to bend, here and here. So we want that joint, that ball, and the end of the other one to match that geometry. So I'm going to scale that outwards. So I have that ball and the finger right in that geometry. And I want to move and rotate so that I can make sure that I have that where it needs to be, right there in the middle. And then the same here, the end of the finger. Move and scale and rotate, whatever we need to do, so it's about in the middle. So we have a good approximation for where that finger really would be and how the bones really would be in that finger. Here again, we'll just do a quick approximation. Okay, we're going to call that good. Now, one really time-saving technique, as we've talked about several times before, is this copy and paste. Because what I can do is I can select, and what I did is I double-clicked on the collarbone, and it will select from the collarbone down. So click, selects everything. Then I can go to my posture, copy my posture, and my mesh should be symmetrical, which means everything on one side should look like the other side. And if that's the case, then I can do the same thing with my bones if I paste posture opposite. So now everything that I did, all the movement that I did for my finger and everything should be pretty much the same. So if I did that with one leg, if I were to come and say, get this a little bit to match that geometry a little bit. Okay, let's maybe have that leg, move that leg a little bit. What I want to do is match this leg here. So I'll move it, rotate it, and I'm going to want this to be longer, so I'm going to scale it, make it a little bit fatter. Bring this back up. And if it's too much, like it is here, then we'll just scale it back down. That's perfectly fine. Move that back down where he needs to be. Get him back. And again, I'm not going to get too super into where it should be because, like I said, I don't think that you guys want to watch a 3-hour video of me just doing sizes and whatnot. So we're just going to get a quick approximation. And we're going to say that's pretty close. It's not, but we're going to say it is. Okay, and I'm not even going to mess with the toes because we can see the toes are pretty much the same as the hands when we go to scale it. So I'm going to select my foot. Again, copy the posture, paste it, and let's do the tail. So I'm going to move this to be where it should be. And all I'm going to do, just for the sake of time, is get this kind of in the same approximation, the same kind of shape. You would definitely want to take more time to scale these bones and make sure that they're matching with the mesh. And here I need a few more bones, let's say 2 more bones. So I'm going to again go to my structure and add 2 more tail links. There we go. Sounds good. Maybe scale this one a little bit. Maybe scale this one a little bit. Okay, that looks about good enough for what we're going to do. So I'm done with my structure and everything, so I'm going to turn my figure mode off. And now what I can do is I can come in and I can start skinning. And to do that, what I can do is select the mesh, because the mesh is what I want to skin. Come to my Modify tab because I want to change or modify something about it. Under my Modify list, my drop down, I want to search for Skin. Skin. Now from Skin, what I'm going to do, or the first thing that I recommend doing, is adding the bones. I'm going to click Bones and Add, and we have a pop-up that has, well, right now it has all of the bones in there. If I had other bones, it would show them as well. And a lot of what I'm going to say about this is kind of personal preference. I personally don't skin anything to BIP01. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select from the pelvis. I'm going to hold Shift and click the last one, so I select everything in between. And I'm going to select. Once I do, it's going to bring all of my bones in. From there, one thing that I would recommend under Display and Advanced Parameters, let's go under Advanced Parameters first, our bone effect limit. Under Advanced Parameters, bone effect limit. This is saying that right now I can have 20 different bones manipulating any one vertex. What I would recommend is don't really go above, unless it's like a facial animation, I would stay around 3 or 4. I'm going to say 4. Okay. What that's going to do is, one, it's going to make my job easier because I'm not going to have the possibility of a bone way up on my shoulder controlling my toe. If I've got some properties that allow me to do that, I've only got a maximum of 4 bones. And most of the time, in a lot of these, 3 is going to work just fine for us. Now what we can see here is, since I've got my bones working and my skin working, I can move a bone and we see that our mesh rotates with it. But we also see that it's very ugly. It is not good looking. This is not a good looking. Your leg would not want to do that at all. So we can come in and we can refine the skin. So again, I'm going to click on my mesh, and what I did is I had it in wireframe mode before, and you can click on wireframe here, or if I want to go to realistic or shaded. The shortcut, the keyboard shortcut for that is F3 if I want to turn it on or off. And the lines that I see here with my mesh, if I want to turn those off, or edge faces, F4 will turn edge faces on and off. Personally, I like to go between wireframe and edged when working with skin so that I can see all of these vertices. And there are a couple of different ways of skinning, and I'll show you my personal preference. Some people will use envelopes, and this circle right here is called an envelope, and you can change the size of that envelope. But in my personal experience, animating video games and movies, I personally like to work better in vertices because I have a lot more control, in my opinion. So what we're going to do is, under Edit Envelope, I'm going to select Vertices, and then in my display, I'm going to show colored vertices because I want to see the weights for them. Show colored faces. So here we have the red and the yellow and the blue, and this is showing influences on different bones. I'm going to color all weights, show colored faces. I don't want to see any envelopes because I'm not going to use them, but I do want to see all vertices. I'm going to show all vertices. Then I'm going to show no envelopes because I don't want to use them. Then I'm going to show any hidden vertices that we may have. I would recommend that personally, from my personal and professional experience. Working with vertices is going to be a little bit easier than working with envelopes. You have more control that way. Now I'm ready to start manipulating my skin values, my weights, my vert weights. So if I come in and select, I'll see, and I'm just clicking and dragging, I'll see these white boxes around the vertices. So I have these vertices selected. But I don't know what bone they're associated with or anything yet. So what I'll do, under my parameters, I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, weight properties, until I see the weight tool. When I click on the weight tool, a little pop-up will come. And here I have all the tools for my skin. If I have a selection already, I can shrink that selection, meaning there's less of a selection. Or, for example, if I have one vertex and I want to grow or want to automatically do more, then I can keep growing. I can select a ring. So, for example, if I have some vertices and I select a ring, it's going to select all of the verts in that ring of verts. And the same with loop. So if I select two, I select loop, then it selected all those vertices in that loop. That can save you a lot of time. Okay, so let's look right underneath shrink, grow, ring, and loop. We have 0, 0.1, 0.25, so on and so forth. These are default values for skin weights with 3ds Max. 0 meaning that if I select a bone, and I know that it's selected because it's blue, if I say 0, that means that that bone will have absolutely no influence on the skin. If I choose 1, then it's 100%. So right now we can see that BIP001 left forearm has a value of 1. So all of these vertices, or at least some of them, because it can be tricky, some of these vertices have a value of 100% to the forearm. And we can kind of see that with the color. Now that we know this is a forearm bone, we can kind of see that this green here is the value in a color value of our weights. Now, what I mean by it, there's one little tricky thing. Let me just say it this way. There's one little tricky thing that if you have one vert, you know that this is absolutely the weight. So you have 0.4 or 40% to the upper arm and 59% to the lower arm. But if I have more than one vert, then what I can see is I have the same weights, but that's not necessarily the value because we know that these are 100%. So what it does is it's going to take the value of that first one, and if I have that value of the first one and I select other ones, then if I have a bone that has more than one weight, it's going to show, or a vertex that has more than one weight, it's going to show that. So we can't just select everything, and it's not going to be able to tell us, it's not going to tell us all of the bones in there because we have some here in the hand that we didn't see. So what I would recommend is to work in small batches. And usually I like to start on one side of the body because you can mirror the weights, and we will go over that. But I like to start in a little part of the body and work my way up. So here you can see that I have the toe, and you can see which bone I have selected. You have the toe 3-1, and we can have this little right here that's kind of highlighted or a different color, so we know that that's the bone that we're talking about. So if I select here, and I want to make that 100% to that toe, and we can see that my color changed to represent the color value of the toe. Let's select here, maybe select the other bone end, maybe one there. I'm going to do this really quick, and this is not going to look very good, but just to give you an idea. So we can see that I have different color weights because of the different bones. Maybe I want all of this to be, so this is a good idea to talk about blending weights. Up in the arm, we saw that more than one bone had influences over vertices. And what we want to do is to utilize that so that when we have a joint that bends, it looks like it bends correctly. So here we have the part of this is actually a foot in an animal. This is a foot, and this is their toes. The animal walks on their toes. I have my foot here, and then this is saying, what is it calling this one? What's it calling that one? Horse link. Okay, calling horse link. Then I want here where my foot and my horse link meet, I want them to be blended. So what I can say is I've got my horse link selected, and I'm going to choose 100%. Let me see how the color changed there. Now I'm going to choose my foot and say maybe I want those to be blended 50%. So each one will have 50% influence. So I can say 0.5, and now I can see that both of them have 50% influence. Maybe here I want the horse link to have 75% influence, and since my foot's already has weight on it, if I click 75, now my horse link has 75%. Maybe up here I want that horse link to have 100%, so I'll click 100. And we can see that I'm changing the value of those vertices. And then here where we're getting into the horse link and the calf, I want those to start blending too. So here I'll select my loop, selected all those there. Maybe I say I want it's 100% to the calf, and maybe I want it to be, since this is closer to the horse link, I want maybe 75% to be on the horse link. And a lot of these, just calling out vert weights, a lot of it comes with experience on knowing where these bones are and how they work. And so if you're not quite sure, you're like, oh, why did you choose that? Don't worry about it, it'll come. But for right now, I'm just gonna call out what I'm doing, and we'll go from there. So 0.5 there. And then from here, I'm going to start blending the other way. So I want the majority to be in the calf, but I want a little bit on the horse link. So loop. And I've got 100% on the, and what I like to do is, because we can have sometimes have some erroneous weight values because of how it works with how it displays them. I usually, if I want it to be 100%, I'll click that bone and then click 1 to make sure that they're all at 100%. Then I'm going to choose that horse link, and I want it to have 25%. And then here, all of this, I want it to be 100% to the calf, so just to make sure. Okay, then we can start blending here at the leg. So loop, and I'm just going to say 100%, and then I'm going to choose my upper leg and choose 25%. Here, get that loop, 100% to the thigh, and maybe 50% to the calf. So now we're blending in here. Loop. Maybe 100% there, and maybe 10% to the lower leg. And then I'm just going to work my way up. And then where those bones start coming together, I want to start thinking about how I'm going to blend them together. Oh, one of the thigh. One way I can look at how those weights are doing, like we saw in the other video, if you watch the other video, if I have animation on them, I can see how they're blending. This one doesn't have any animation, so let me fix this weight real quick. So here, here. That to be there, 25. Okay. You be 0.9. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out of the skin real quick. I'm just going to click it. So it's no longer blue, it's no longer active. I'm going to click F3 on my keyboard so I can go to wireframe. Or you can choose wireframe, just click on your wireframe. Or click on the shader and then click on wireframe here. Select my foot. I'm going to turn on my auto key so I don't have to think about whether or not I'm creating keys or not. And in key info, as we saw in the other one, I'm just going to set a key and then come somewhere else and move. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I can then see how my scanning looks just by moving my slider. So I want to see how all of this stuff is animating, see how it's all looking. So maybe I want these toes to be less influenced by the foot, so I can come back in, select my mesh, go to my modifier tab, click my skin again, and then I can select these vertices and maybe say that I want them to be less influenced by the horse link and more by the foot. So I can say maybe the foot has 75% of the influence, and you can see how it kind of popped up a little bit. This also gives me a good idea of areas that I need to work on. So here I can see in this area, I can see a lot of stretching. These lines are way long here. So there's a couple of things, and this is where you have to start kind of making decisions on how do I want it to look and how do I want to do it. We could give these vertices here influence for the pelvis, or we could say we want these vertices here to have influence from the leg. So what I'm going to do is select these vertices and say that I want them to have influence from the leg. And you can see that they already have influence from the pelvis and the spine. And the spine's up here pretty far, so I'm going to say we don't want any from that spine, so I'm going to set it to 0. And we can see the color change. And then I'm going to say for that left leg, I want it to have 50% maybe, and we can see it move. And these are always adjustable, so don't be afraid. If it doesn't look right, you're not going to mess anything up. It's just something that we can adjust. And let's say maybe here across the waist, we want to have maybe nothing from the spine and a lot from the pelvis. And what we see here, this is what's called clipping, how we have the mesh clipping through itself. We want to try to alleviate that as much as possible, but sometimes it just happens. And we have to be okay with that if it does. That doesn't mean that we want to be sloppy and not worry about anything, but that is saying that if there is some clipping and we just can't help it, then it's okay. Another thing that we can do is if a bone has influence, like let's say I'm going to put 10% on the thigh, but I don't want to come up and say 0.25, 0.5, or whatever. I can use set weight and scale weight, and by default set weight is 0.5, which means every time I increase it, it increases by 0.5 of what it is already. So if I go up, I'm going up by 0.5, and we can see that my vert is moving. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You can see that move, and then we also have the scale weight. So my weight is 45%, and if I continue to go up, then we'll see that it's increasing by a scale percentage. Okay. Now you can change these to whatever you want to be, but I would say usually what's already there is just fine. So we can come in and kind of adjust what we want to specifically. Maybe I'll select this one here and give it less spine, more thigh. And if I don't like that, then I can give it, oh, I was giving it to the pelvis, that's why. There we go. Now we can see that this is set pretty far back. So we have to do a good balance. What's a good balance here? Okay, now this is vert right in here. Let's change this one to have more thigh. Maybe this one to have more thigh. So we want to have a good balance of what looks like clipping and what it looks like it should be doing. So we do here, maybe put some more of this on thigh. See the difference there? Okay, so we've gone through some basic skinning, and the same thing that applies what we've done here is going to apply for the entire mesh. You want to move that mesh around, you want to animate your skeleton, you want to find out what looks good, what doesn't, and what doesn't look good. So for example, when I animate, I can see here I have a vert that's moving. And we can see it's got kind of a bluish color, which means that it has some weight from the leg. Well, I don't want it to. That's way too high up, so I can take that off. Here we can see that these two too. So maybe I'll select all of these, and I already have my leg selected, so I'm just going to say 0. Now I don't have any. So the last thing that we'll talk about is how we can save time by, with a symmetrical mesh, which this is, which means one side is the same as the other side, we can mirror our weights. So what I'm going to do is click on mirror mode, and I have a lot of things that I can do. And I'll mouse over and see that I can paste green bones to blue bones. I can paste blue bones to green bones, paste green verts to blue verts, and paste blue verts to green verts. What I see here though is that my bones are red, which means that if I try to mirror them, since they're red, they don't know what their corresponding bone is on the other side. So for example, this upper arm doesn't know that this is the upper arm on the other side because we need to set our parameters. So what I'm going to do is go into my front view, and what we can see is this is the center line of my biped, and this is the center line of the mirror attribute that I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to do this on the x-axis. If I wanted to change it to y or z, I can do that. But since here we have the z-axis. Since my mesh is mirrored on the y or on the x-axis, I want to change that back to x. And then I have the mirror offset and the mirror threshold. The offset is we're actually going to move that line itself. So if I get that close, we can see that now my bones have popped from red to green to blue. And then the mirror threshold, which is like kind of like error. So if I have verts that aren't exactly the same, if I change this to 0, then we can see our bones go back to red because they're not exactly the same. So I'm going to turn my threshold up until it's kind of like saying, okay, well, it's kind of in this range, so it's good. So for here, I popped at 0.39. And then what I can do is I can say, you know, how do I want to mirror this? And what you'll notice on the center is that it's still red. And it's going to be because the ones in the center, like the spine, it doesn't have any corresponding links on either side. It's only just the one spine, so there's not going to be any corresponding mirrored bones for it. So what we'll say is we've been working in blue, so we either want to mirror blue bones to green bones or blue verts to green verts. So let's see, and what we're going to look at is the color, the weights. You can see here how we have blended weights. Here we have blended weights. So let's see if we do blue to green verts. So we didn't see too much happen. So maybe let's try blue to green bones. And what we saw there is that, let me go back and show. So we have all these areas where we can see mixed weights. When I selected the blue to green bones, all that changed because now I'm mirroring these weights on this side. So that is an awesome way to save a whole lot of time, and I would highly recommend that workflow. If you have a symmetrical character, then weight one side of it and then mirror it. There's no reason to do both sides if you can just mirror them. And then from there, we can continue to refine this until we get it how we want. And I would recommend doing sections, like I said, start with maybe a leg or a foot or an arm and continue on and move and rotate and animate and then scale, or I'm sorry, not scale, skin until you get how you want it to. So this is going to be just a basic video of skinning. There will be a more advanced video. But until then, play around with those bring in a simple character. I would recommend a simple mesh. If you've never skinned a character before, I wouldn't recommend bringing in a 15,000 poly character. This one is around 1,000 polys, so that's good to start off with because you don't have a lot of vertices. We only have 834 vertices. We don't have a whole lot of work to do. It's easier to tell what vertices you need to adjust the less there are. So I would definitely recommend starting with a lower poly mesh. Once you get more comfortable, then you can work up into higher polys and whatnot. But I would recommend playing around with this and continue to do so until you are comfortable. Until then, have fun.